This is typhus fever. Typhus fever, also called sylvatic typhus, is a disease caused by a bacterium called Rickettsia prowazekii and is spread to people through contact with infected body lice. This is regarded as fact. Why? Because the public often takes scientific data and analysis to be objective, to be true and only true. But what if I told you that has not always been the case? There was a time in history during the early 1900s when typhus fever was blamed on Mexicans. As stated by a Los Angeles Times article in 1916, typhus is transmitted by body vermin and in no other way. The State Board of Health calls attention to the menace of typhus fever and smallpox, both of which are filth diseases and which are being imported from Mexico into the United States. There were 26 cases of typhus reported from June 1st to October 2nd, 1916, and with the exception of 2 contact cases, one of uncertain origin in San Francisco, and one of a Los Angeles attorney who was infected from a bunch of Mexicans who entered his office. The cases were all found in camps of recently arrived Mexican refugees. Why were Mexicans blamed for typhus when the primary causes of disease are bacterium, viruses, and undesirable living conditions? Also, why was the solution to eradicating this disease to pay special attention to hygiene and sanitation among occupants, wherever Mexican quarters are maintained, or to fumigate every Mexican upon arrival? To understand why typhus was blamed on Mexicans, we have to understand the cultural and historical context of what was occurring in Los Angeles in the early 1900s. We also need to understand and consider that not all medical knowledge is scientifically objective. During the early 1900s, there was a large surge of Mexican farm workers coming into the United States as the Mexican Revolution had created economic instability in Mexico. This economic instability, particularly within indigenous and poorer communities, forced people to move to the United States to find jobs, particularly in agriculture. Coming from a foreign country and of a darker skin complexion, Mexicans were regarded as a public health menace to Los Angeles, a city committed to becoming a modern metropolis. According to health officer Dr. Walter Lindley, LA had everything that God could give a city and emphasized the natural beauty of the civilized landscape. However, this beautiful modern city had rotten spots. Those spots consisted of Mexican, Chinese, and Japanese communities. These minority communities, specifically the Mexican communities, were regarded as rotten spots as various health epidemics, such as outbreaks of typhus and smallpox, were observed here. Public health officials then began to attribute the characteristics of disease and illness to the biological makeup and cultural practices of the Mexican person, rather than focusing on the true cause of disease: inadequate hygienic living conditions. As Natalia Molina so eloquently put it, people of Chinese, Mexican, and Japanese ancestry in Los Angeles were portrayed as threats to public health and civic well-being, and obscured the real cause of communicable disease and illness: inadequate medical care, exposure to raw sewage, and malnutrition. To cure these diseases was to eradicate these rotten spots, not to understand how these diseases are spread through infected lice, but to blame those most heavily affected by the disease, nor to understand how to reduce the occurrence of typhus fever by creating a sanitary city, but to say that there is something biologically wrong and weak with those who are being affected by the epidemics. The city of Los Angeles saw this as a form to not only cure the rotten spots, but to Americanize the Mexican way of life. As Natalia Molina put it, cleanliness became something more than a way to prevent epidemics and make cities livable. It became a route to citizenship, to become American. It became a way of telling who was fit to go to school, to work, or to interact with the general American public. It became a way to correct the backward culture of the Mexican and introduce Americanization programs. According to the LA Times, every Mexican upon arrival should be sought out and thoroughly cleaned and fumigated. All quarters should be cleaned up and strict sanitary regulations introduced. But why only the Mexican communities? Why not the white and American communities as well? All humans carry and are capable of carrying the same diseases regardless of race and country of origin. and certain groups of people do not deserve to be combated by cleanliness and perceived as biologically inferior. However, these notions continue to be upheld among the medical community. The medical community still subconsciously or consciously believe and/or rely upon stereotypes to diagnose their patients. This leads to improper and inadequate medical care. Stereotypes like the overly fertile Mexican woman, the unclean Mexican man, the wily Asian vendor, and the germ-spreading Chinese hurt us all.